Another possibility is that the invasion could have had or the invasion preparations, or the invasion itself could have had an earlier start date. That's because while the rest of the world was assuming that Britain would be next, and the Germans were feverishly preparing an invasion in June 1940, in fact, nothing was happening. Hitler was expecting the British to surrender of their own accord as soon as France was conquered. And he was too busy celebrating victory to give much thought to an invasion. And also, he was concentrating on defeating France. The Dunkirk evacuation finished on the 4th of June, but the Sealion order wasn't issued until July the 16th, which means that at least a whole month, maybe 6 weeks, was wasted when nothing was done to prepare for the invasion. And consequently, the Germans didn't actually completely finish preparing and training for Sealion until October 1940. So the army wanted to land 2 hours after high tide at dawn between the 20th and 24th of September. The Navy wanted between a quarter and full moon, and persuaded that the dawn landing wasn't necessary, but a landing early in September was originally planned in August. The original date was August the 18th, so perhaps if they had started preparations in June, they might have been able to meet the August date. Another possibility is that Mussolini listens to his advisors and doesn't rush into the war, and instead starts preparations for war and carries them out a few weeks later. Mussolini was an impulsive guy. He was governed by his emotions. But he was afraid he wouldn't get into the war in time to receive any of the spoils. So he declared war on June the 10th, 1940. This declaration took everybody by surprise, and none of his armed forces were ready. For instance, the Italian troops weren't able to attack France until June the 20th. If instead of precipitating a declaration so early, he had prepared for the attack, and he could have had his troops attacking when he declared war, and that could have included an attack on Malta, which at that stage of the war Britain had decided was indefensible. And they had a plan for an attack on Malta, which they could have used that, or they could have maybe copied the German invasion of Denmark when they had a ship full of German troops disgorge its troops into Copenhagen harbour. Another possibility with the Italians, if they had declared war on June the 10th, was that their contribution to Sealion is accepted. The Germans refused all Italian offers until it was too late. Of course, the Corpo Aero Italiano, or the Italian Air Force contribution, was quite significant. It's 200 aircraft. But of course, the BR-20 bombers had all these problems with, and the fighters were antiquated. But still, if they'd replaced the bombers with SM-79 torpedo bombers, that would have made up for some of the deficiencies in the aircraft that the Axis deployed. And at least if German bombers were there, would have meant, and fighters, it might have meant a few less German fighters or bombers being shot down, and maybe a little bit more success overall. Mussolini also offered ground troops, but of course they were no use because they didn't have the shipping to get them across. But maybe if Mussolini had also provided shipping for the troops, that would have made a difference. without the Italian fleet being able to intervene, they probably wouldn't have done so anyway, because they were designed for the Mediterranean and they couldn't get past Gibraltar. But many Italian submarines did go past Gibraltar and were based at Brittany. They were called the Atlantic Submarine Group, and perhaps they could have helped by attacking British shipping at the western end of the channel, and that would have relieved a few U-boats for other duties. As it was, the CAI didn't arrive until October, after the Battle of Britain was effectively over. So I just mentioned Gibraltar. So another possibility is that Spain joined the war in 1940. And in fact, when Italy declared war, Spain declared itself a non-belligerent, which meant in practice they supported the Axis countries by doing such things as supplying wolfram to the Germans and allowing German submarines to be based at Spanish ports. The Caudillo, or Franco, the Spanish leader, was actually fairly keen on joining the war. And the person that the Germans had to negotiate with him and consider their expert on Spain was Admiral Canaris, who is the head of German military intelligence, who spoke fluent Spanish and had spent considerable time in Spanish and South American countries. However, he was an anti-Nazi who would die in a concentration camp cell near the end of the war. And when he went to see Franco, he actually advised Franco what to say to enable him to not join the war, and he advised him not to join the war. And so, it's possibly due to Franco that Franco made all these ridiculous demands for huge amounts of grain and all sorts of other supplies to be given to him if he joined the war. It's possible that negotiations with Franco could have taken a different direction, and of course it's another domino effect of if Malta had been taken, that he would most certainly have joined the war, because it would have meant the western end of the Mediterranean would have been much safer for him. And that would also have led to the invasion of Gibraltar and the loss of that major British naval base. And the Spanish fleet was one of the largest of the neutral nations and had several useful destroyers that would have made quite a difference to the invasion fleet. The British fleet would also have had to blockade Spain, and so it would have been further stretched in what it had to do. And Vichy France would, of course, have a few things to say about who got what, because they and Spain were rather not in agreement about who should have what in North Africa, and that would have had to be sorted out. But with Spain in the war, they certainly would have been more pro-German themselves. And there's also the position of Portugal that had to be considered. Possibly Britain would have had used Portugal as a base, or invaded sent troops and ships to Portugal, which had been a long-time British ally, or else Portugal, now then being a fascist country, would have joined the Axis. It's interesting what might have happened. It's possible that Spain might have wanted to invade Portugal. Yeah, lots of things that could have flowed from a small thing, just like Italy making its entry to the war a more considered one, or else even Canaris was actually there was actually an attempt on his life during the First World War when he was working as a spy, and if that had succeeded, who knows? Things might have been different in Spain in the Second World War.